Welcome to Adventures in Solitaire. Today we'll be discussing DestinyQuest, the Raiders of the Dune Sea. So, as mentioned in the intro, today we'll be discussing DestinyQuest, the Raiders of the Dune Sea. My first foray into the DestinyQuest books was with the first book in the series, The Legion of Shadow. This first book reminded me a lot of the Brothers Grimm stories that most of us are familiar with. There was definitely a heavy hint to some of those stories early in the book. It reminded me a lot more of an adult version of some of the earlier Choose Your Own Adventure style books that had first come out during the early 80s. DestinyQuest has grown quite a bit since the first book, both in writing style, storytelling, and game mechanics that were first offered. But before we dive into a full-on out final thought segment, let's talk about the rules and systems in the book that you will be utilizing as you make your way in the world of DestinyQuest. DestinyQuest has 3 primary attributes for your character's speed, brawn, and magic. Of these, the most important attribute, I would argue, is speed. During combat, you will roll 2 6-sided dice and add your speed value to them. Each enemy that you fight will also have a speed value and will also roll 2d6 and add their speed value. A tie ends up in a draw for the round. If the roll does not result in a draw, then the winner will get the chance to land a blow. So if your speed is high enough, then you will consistently be landing blows where your opponent will not. Both brawn and magic are used to amplify the damage done after the victor is determined during the speed step of combat. So if you win, you can choose your brawn or magic attribute and then roll 1d6 and add your chosen attribute value to that roll. Damage is then reduced by your opponent's armor, or in the case of the enemy won the speed roll, you will add their chosen attribute to the d6 roll and reduce it by your armor value. Because the d6 roll can swing pretty heavy for a damage roll, your magic and brawn attributes are still very important during the damage stage of each round. Every round will have a speed step and a damage resolution step and will then reset for a new round until either the enemy or you are defeated. Do note that defeat is rarely ever the end. You really have to choose to end the game to start over, but we'll talk more on this later. In addition to your 3 attribute values, you will also have, along with your opponent, a vast array of special abilities with different timings and triggers. I really want to anchor on this point for a moment, as I have never seen a CYOA game, Choose Your Own Adventure, with as many potential effects and or abilities for your character or the enemy. As you can see here, there is an entire section of the book that is a library of the various abilities and effects and timings. This actually also includes some adventure games that have more open-ended mechanics, but those are not CYOA books. This speaks volumes for what has been done here, not only for this book, but for all of the other books in the DestinyQuest series as they share that attribute. There are abilities that are used at the beginning of combat, before or after combat rolls, modifiers that are applied after you roll, passives that are typically applied at the end of a combat round, and health-reducing powerful warp abilities that can typically be used at any time during combat. So this definitely shakes up the typical roll and damage die rolls that we are used to in so many CYOA books. On a side note, items such as health potions can be used at will in combat, which is a relief. Having to choose to use a health potion while possibly taking damage is never a fun choice to make, and it is thankfully one that you will not be making in the series. You do have a limited amount of useful items that you can carry, but it is that limit on how many items you can carry that can affect their use as well. When will you be able to replenish those stocks again? Or even more important, will you have the funds? Funds are balanced well and money does not grow on trees. You'll definitely remember and take note of any money that you make or find. Like many of the more advanced CYOA gamebooks, like DestinyQuest, you have the ability to find, buy, and gain equipment, rare artifacts, and other useful items. DestinyQuest The Raiders of Dune Sea has something of a bit of another rarity here, as you have a huge amount of equipment that you can equip. This is something that, again, I expect to see in adventure or RPG games and not CYOA games. I do not currently own, and I am not aware of any titles that include the amount of equipable gear that Destiny Quest has as shown here. In most reviews, I tend to show off examples of town shops and goods, highlighting the item list, but I don't want to do that here as the shops themselves, for me, are a bit of something that can feel like a bit of a spoiler here. So instead, I'm going to show an example of equipment that can be equipped early on that everyone will receive. I would love to show more, as this is a major part of the system. It definitely has a looter feel to it in the same way that we have come to expect in electronic games like Diablo. This is something that I believe the author was well aware of when he was designing the series, and I'm thankful for it. I'm always pushing my luck to venture into side areas of rooms in hopes that I will find some rare equipment that will make the next encounter that much easier. This is a keep it or lose it system in that you must get rid of anything that you already have in the current slot if you want to get a new item that will occupy the same slot on your inventory sheet. In the example shown, we have items that will give us +1 armor, speed, magic, and brawn. This is what you'll typically start with, giving you the option to use either magic or brawn in your first combat systems. And this is true for most of the books. Destiny Quest also has another, again, Diablo-like system where you can have a vault that you can access throughout the book. This is something that will not be made available right away, but when it is, it can be used to sidestep the issue of losing an item when you gain another of the same type. You'll also be able to hang on to favorites that you're not sure that you want to lose just yet. On the note of hanging on to items and extending their usefulness, you will also, over time, gain access to items that will allow you to improve and or modify existing equipment, like gems or gem slots in other games. And there's actually quite a selection there of things that can modify. This is a really cool feature that I was really excited to see added to the series. So far, we have not talked about character focus or classes, and Destiny Quest does have a class-like system. As the game progresses, you will unlock the ability to choose one of 3 paths: the path of the warrior, rogue, or a mage. This will be a permanent choice not only for this book, but for books to come. That is, if I understand where the series is currently headed, and I'm very excited about this, but I'll talk about that a bit more later. In addition to the permanent path choice, you'll also have the ability to take on careers that are less permanent. You will have the potential to find and keep pets that can aid you in battle as well. We mentioned death earlier. Death is handled rather uniquely here, as it is more akin to the experience we have when we sit down and at a game console or a PC game. When we die, we either start again at some respawn point, or we reload a save game, typically, that is. It is the same here as well. There are also no penalties to death aside from the fact that you cannot replenish lost or used items in combat. So make sure you want to use those goods and that they will make a difference, or you may not get them back. This was a very interesting take that was so unique, actually, that it took me a moment to not feel as if I was cheating the game somehow. It was a realization that we do this all the time with our electronic games. Can you imagine playing like Iron Man? That is to say that when you die, you have to restart the whole game with every game that you played? I don't know about you, but I doubt I would have finished many of those games, if any of them, as they are made to be played with reloads and save games and respawn points in most cases. So that was definitely interesting for me. Let's take a moment to talk about the world map and how you'll be traveling through it. If you have watched my channel, then you know that I have reviewed other similar series like Fabled Lands and Crown and Tower. Make no mistake, this is definitely a different book altogether. Destiny Quest is an open world game, but not quite in the same fashion. I know I have mentioned a certain electronic game here a few times, but I really think it sticks well here. In Fabled Lands and Crown and Tower, you'll be walking across the countryside to get from point to point. In Destiny Quest, you'll be using a map, and when you want to go to a location, you choose the location, and then you're there. This is very similar to what happens in games like Diablo, where you have a core location that you tend to teleport to. Now, I want to be clear here. You will be traveling and moving through the land, but you will do so in each location. Choosing which paths you want to go down or pass on, your choices of path can have permanent consequences. There will be items you won't find and events that will not trigger. As a quick segue, there is a keyword system here, which is a great addition for the series as it allows for more flexibility with choice and consequence mechanics of the system. So back to the map. You have several different types of locations, and they are all color-coded. You can travel to any area on the map freely, but you will want to be careful as some of those areas are way too much for a new character. Red areas are some of the most challenging areas, and green areas are the safest, while still presenting a challenge to the new character. Orange areas play the middle ground, and it's recommended that you stage yourself and only go to those higher difficulty areas, that being orange or red, when you have cleared out the previous color. This can help to get that feeling of power creep that can be lost when we level with enemies we encounter, so take some time to explore and gain experience before you move on. Each map also has at least one main town that you can get the lay of the land at. This is true for this book and the others. You can find quests, shops, bounties, and all sorts of interesting and useful things in the towns. The author recommends that you visit these places first, and I definitely recommend that here as well. There are a total of 2 maps, also called acts. Sound familiar? Again? I really do love all the callouts here in this series to that beloved electronic title of mine. It is always hard for me to review these stories, as without going into great detail, I can only allude to the concepts that the book is trying to put forth, along with the experience, without ruining it in part or altogether. The tone here is dark, and that is a setting that I love. I had mentioned before in my reviews that I like dark or gray tones, almost, if not gothic, in nature. There are religious tones here, not quite like we see in some, like say, the Warhammer universe, but definitely coming close in my opinion. There are those whose jobs it is to seek heretics and those who go against the religious grain and put them down, so to speak. It is not a pretty world in regards to tone. And that, to me, is a great draw. You'll be forced to make moral decisions here and there, and I appreciated the pressure from that, especially given the dark tone of the universe. Many times in a setting like this, it can seem as though being the good guy can be more punishing than taking the easy way out. I never quite felt like that, but the pressure was definitely still there. I think it was balanced fairly well here. The prose are definitely improved book over book, and this is one of my favorites. Even better is the fact that there is another first in the series for DestinyQuest, and that you will be able to carry your character over into the next book. I am not sure of all the mechanics of this, but this has been one of my major caveats of the system thus far, and finding out that this will be a multi-book adventure has me really excited. Okay, so closing thoughts. I currently own all of the DestinyQuest books for a reason. They are good, well written, and offer mechanics that I cannot find elsewhere. The DestinyQuest books are some of the longest CYO adventures that I have, with the latest entry weighing in at about 842 paragraph entries. You will definitely want a bookmark or two here for the series. The vast number of options to customize your character as you play through the game is addictive. You will have to make hard choices throughout in regards to what you are going to throw away or keep. You will be doing this a lot and often. This could even be the case when you are choosing what rewards to accept as you move through the book. You will have to pay careful attention to the wording for rewards, as many of them are a choose one reward. This really helps with replayability. The writing or prose of the book continues to evolve over the time, as mentioned before, and it feels like it has reached a great peak with this iteration of the series. I remember reading the first few pages and being completely drawn into the backstory for my character. I loved it. This has to be my favorite introduction to a character I was taking over so far in all of my CYOA books in my collection. I have been reading CYOA since I was about 7 years old or so. As I got older and learned more advanced books like the Lone Wolf series, I would find other series here or there and would not heavily buy into another series until I came across Fabled Lands. So I have a pretty wide spread of books to refer back to in memory, like many of my generation of CYOA fans. I cannot think of one that managed to match the writing level unless we're talking about the last 5 to maybe 10 years of CYOA novels. Yet it still manages to capture the feel of excitement and discovery that I had at such a young age oh so long ago. It is so good that I was tempted to read the entire beginning section just so it could be experienced before the book was purchased to help give a feel for what the reader is about to step into. As mentioned before, in regards to the overall story, I do hesitate to cover much here, but I can say that it will leave you with a bit of a cliffhanger. The good news is that more books are coming, one in particular, very soon. There were some mechanics that I had to wrap my head around as they were so different than books I had read before in this genre. The deathless and speed mechanics definitely threw me at first, but I have learned to enjoy them for what they are and to discard some of my preconceived notions of what the right way to handle this or that game mechanic was. I am thankful to Michael Ward for shaking my perceptions of how game books can be written here. Like other greats in the CYOA marketplace, I think the authors should take note here in regards to what the author has brought to the genre. If you do not already have a DestinyQuest book in your library, I can say that you do not likely have anything like it now in regards to those new mechanics that it brings to your collection. If you are unsure, then I would say that the Raiders of the Dune Sea is a great entry into the series and would be a good place to start. Though the books speak of events that have come before in previous books, they introduce you to them in a way that the prior books are not required. If you enjoy CYOA at all, I cannot see how this would not be a memorable experience and well worth the price of entry. I own all of them, as I said, for a reason. With that said, a Kickstarter is set for the 21st of February, which is the 5th book in the series, Wrath of Ragnarok. Wrath of Ragnarok is the second book in what the author has dubbed the Sands of Time trilogy, and this review covering the first of the trilogy, of course, which is why I say it's a great place to start. I should have a link in the description for the pre-registration for those that are interested, as I was and am. So in closing here, DestinyQuest, The Raiders of the Dune Sea, and the series as a whole has a place next to my desk where it belongs, and that's where it'll stay. So as always, if you have listened this far or not, thank you so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks. Bye.